All right, so if you do any of these 5 exercises, you're probably doing yourself a disservice either by limiting your gains, wasting time, or even potentially hurting yourself. And I'm not talking about some random you see on social media. In fact, you've probably seen someone at your gym currently doing them, or maybe you yourself are doing one of these exercises. So buckle up. Here are the 5 worst exercises to do for muscle growth and what exercises to do instead to replace them. And make sure you show the last exercise to your girlfriend, sister, mom, aunt, or maybe if you yourself are one of the few women that watch my videos. First off, I appreciate y'all. And you definitely want to stick around to the end because it will definitely apply to you. What would make an exercise inherently bad? Well, to me, it's a combination of things. Number 1, it would be an exercise that limits your range of motion in the stretch position, making it harder for you to build muscle. Number 2 would be an exercise that's hard to progressive overload, making it harder for you to continue to build muscle long term. Number 3 would be an exercise that is wildly unstable, making it harder for you to actually push to failure. Number 4 is an exercise that puts you at a higher risk of getting injured, despite there being alternatives that are less risky. And number 5 are exercises that involve other muscle groups outside the target muscle group that you want to train. So with that said, let's get to it. Now, the first exercise on the list is the plate press / hex press. I know they're slightly different, but they're essentially shortened partials of a conventional close grip dumbbell bench press, with the plate press being even worse because of the difficulty to progressive overload and the even more limited range of motion in the stretch position because a plate is definitely bigger than dumbbells. This is to say that the plate press and the hex press are awful exercises because they don't allow the chest to get a good stretch at the bottom, which is arguably the most important part of a bench press, considering that the chest is a muscle that not only benefits from stretch-mediated hypertrophy, but also there is a growing body of evidence in the science-based lifting community that the lengthen, so the stretch part of an exercise, actually yields better hypertrophy gains than the contracted shortened part. Not to also mention that the biceps are also going to be randomly involved because you have to squeeze the plates together. Now, let me provide my rebuttal on some common arguments for doing this exercise. So some people will say that you're working the inner chest more by doing this exercise. You're not. There's actually no way to target the inner chest. But if you're focusing on arm reduction, getting your arms across your body to get your chest as short as possible, might as well do a cable fly or a converging chest press instead, where you're able to get a deep stretch and then get shortened. Next thing I hear often is, I'm doing this exercise as a triceps exercise. Again, there are better options out there if you're trying to bias the triceps, even in a compound movement type of setting, such as with a regular Dumbo close grip bench press where your elbows are relatively tucked and you're not going to be limiting the stretch you get in your triceps in the bottom position or have your biceps involved for no reason. Also real quick, if you like the clothes I'm wearing, I'm actually sponsored by this brand, Able. Now, Able makes a ton of affordable, high quality gym apparel, and it's probably the most underrated brand because it's like the price of Gymshark, if not cheaper, with the quality of Alpha Lean. That's kind of like the way I like to explain it. Now here I got the Origin tank going on right now. I know this tank has been long awaited. They finally released it so y'all can get it. But they also released their Ascend short line, which is kind of like a luxury athleisure type of vibe. So if you're interested in getting this, don't forget to use code PATH for an extra 10% off at checkout, as well as it being a great way to support my page while also getting some nice clothes at a discount. Back to the video. Number 2 are actually 2 exercises that I'm categorizing as unnecessarily risky shoulder exercises. First of which being the upright row, and second was the behind the neck press I just demonstrated here. Now both of these exercises put your shoulder at a higher risk of developing potential injuries or just getting pain without any real benefit, especially considering that there are safer alternatives that are very viable. So starting with the upright row, I'm not an expert when it comes to shoulder impingement, but for the upright row, from my understanding, it puts your shoulder at a really provocative situation to get hurt. Now overall, if you want more info, I defer you to actually go see a physical therapist, or at the very least, check out Athlete X's video on this, which is actually the big inspiration for this video and the big inspo for these 2 exercises specifically. In the case for the behind the neck press, it forces you to be pressing in your frontal plane completely out to the side, which does one of 2 things. Either it limits your range of motion on your front delts compared to pressing in front of your body, or if you're daring enough to go super deep, it can potentially lead to some sort of shoulder pain. A common arguments I hear when it comes to both these exercises, starting with the upright row, what if I only have a barbell? That is actually that's a valid point. With that said, if you only have a barbell to work with, I'm assuming that you're somewhat of a beginner. And if you're a beginner, it's not gonna take a lot of weight to actually train your side delts with a lateral raise. So at the very least, I recommend you invest in just one dumbbell. It doesn't even have to be that heavy, so it should be relatively cheap. Or if that is not a viable option, you can actually find something in your household that's relatively heavy that has a handle, and that can suffice as like a makeshift dumbbell for performing lateral raises. But you might be thinking like, dude, I don't wanna look dumb doing that. Well look, if money is tight, you definitely don't want to be risking a shoulder injury that is going to be way more expensive than one dumbbell. So option's yours, I'm just giving my recommendations. And then the arguments for the behind the neck press goes, it trains these side delts better than a regular shoulder press. My response here is, why are you trying to train your side delts on a predominantly front delt exercise? If it is such a priority to train your side delts, which I think is super valid, well, you're better off doing an isolation exercise such as a lateral raise that specifically hits the side delts without involving other muscle groups. And then the second argument I hear on the behind neck press is, what if I just don't get pain going deep? Well, good for you, man. The thing is, I understand that my video can potentially reach millions of people, hopefully. Please leave a like because that supports my page. And knowing that it causes me pain when I do it, I know there's at least someone else out there that I can save from doing these terrible exercises and avoiding any sort of shoulder discomfort. So in my mind, it is worth it to be more conservative and give you the advice to do the regular shoulder press in front of your body and then just skip the entire risk of doing a frontal plane press and just stick to scapular plane pressing, just because it is the more conservative, universal advice that will keep everyone safe. So if I can save just one person from this, I think it's worth pointing out. Now, if you've tried any of these exercises in the past or are currently doing them now, don't feel bad because there's a lot of misinformation on the internet. Ultimately, fitness is a learning process, and as long as you're dedicating yourself on a daily basis to improve at your craft, you're doing the right thing. And that's exactly why I come in with a mentor-like attitude for those in my one-on-one fitness coaching program, where the main goal isn't just getting you in shape with a custom workout program and meal plan, but it's also to teach you and answer all the questions you might have regarding fitness so that you not only get in shape, but you're able to be self-sufficient for the rest of your life. As the saying goes, give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. But if you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Let's get back to it. Number 3 is a Dumbo curl into a shoulder press. Yeah. Or honestly, any combo where you're trying to string in 2 exercises at once can fall in this category. Now, it might seem cool, it's actually kind of fun to do as well, but what ends up happening is your bicep curl is likely weaker than your shoulder press. So what ends up happening is your biceps just becomes a limiting factor on the exercise so that you fail with your biceps before you actually reach failure on your front delts. Instead, you're better off just separating the 2 exercises, maybe starting with the shoulder press. Once you reach failure with that, then you can go into the bicep curls, presumably using different weight, unless you're just like built kind of different. Hell, you can even do these 2 exercises as antagonistic supersets back to back. Now, main argument I hear when it comes to this is, well, I save time by doing this exercise. In reality, when you compare this to the antagonistic superset, you're saving at most like 2 minutes in a set of 4. And if you think about like 2 minutes, if you really want to save time, you're better off saving time, spending less time on your phone when you're taking a dookie, you know? Now, the 4th exercise is the Hardw Plank. There are 2 main gripes I have when it comes to this exercise. First off, the plank is what's known as an isometric exercise, meaning there's no range of motion on the exercise. Instead, you're simply just squeezing your abs and holding it in place. In general, isometric exercises are not as conducive to muscle growth compared to what's known as isotonic exercises, which are exercises that have a range of motion where you're stretching the muscle and then contracting them. And the second gripe I have when it comes to the plank is that after a while, it becomes too easy. In fact, I've been holding a plank this entire time explaining my gripes with the plank. Instead of doing a regular plank for like 5 minutes, what you can do is an even harder version of the plank. I call it the Hardw Plank, which can gas you out in like 15 seconds. The main argument I hear when it comes to the plank is, what if I'm doing a plank to build core strength or core stability? And that is actually quite valid. However, it is not the most efficient exercise because once again, after a while, it just becomes too easy. In my humble opinion, a better core exercise would be something like a hollow pose, which can translate better for body weight dips as well as pull-ups. Now, admittedly, out of the 5 exercises, this is probably the most controversial one, but I stand by what I say because I think there are better alternatives for training your core, especially as you get more advanced. So for the women lifters out there watching, including my girlfriend, I love you, babe, you might be familiar with the cast glute bridge. Now, this might also be a little bit of a controversial take, but allow me to explain. The cast glute bridge is essentially a shortened partial of the conventional hip thrust with a slow tempo. Let's talk about the shortened partial part first. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of evidence in the science-based lifting community is pointing to longer length training, so training in a stretch position, to be more beneficial for hypertrophy than otherwise. As Milo from Wolf Coaching pointed out in one of his more recent videos, there are now like 25 studies in support of longer length training. With that in mind, the cast glute bridge limits your ability to get a stretch on your glutes because you're only staying at the top. It's a shortened partial. And then to address the second part, and that is tempo, the cast glute bridge is usually done at a very slow and controlled tempo on both the concentric as well as the eccentric. To address the eccentric part first, having a slow controlled tempo on the eccentric, I'm all for it. That is amazing, actually. You should be in control of the eccentric by putting a tempo on it, call it 2 seconds long. And while that is true of the eccentric, voluntarily slowing down the concentric actually doesn't yield any hypertrophy gains. In fact, it might actually hinder your gains because it limits your body's ability to recruit high threshold motor units, which, from my understanding, are the most important muscle fibers involved in hypertrophy that get recruited as you approach failure. Now, moving on to common arguments in support of the cast glute bridge, I feel more tension in my glutes and soreness afterwards. Now, I want to stress that there's an important difference between feeling tension when you're training and mechanical tension, which is the main driver of hypertrophy. There are many other instances where you can feel tension in a muscle without actually training it for hypertrophy. Now, I can stand up straight, squeeze my glutes, I feel tension in my glutes, but I'm not making any meaningful hypertrophy gains. I'm just attracting other people to look at me weird. This is similar with soreness. Soreness isn't a direct sign that you're making gains, although it can be correlated, like it can happen at the same time. Now, the second argument I hear for the cast glute bridge is I use it as an intensity technique after I reach failure with full range of motion hip thrusts. Now, to be nitpicky here, if you were able to get to the top for the cast glute bridge, did you actually go to failure for the hip thrust? See, in order to get to the top, you had to have been able to complete the rep. Isn't it failure when you can't get another rep? You see what I'm saying? Now, doing partials after full range of motion failure is a great intensity technique. I have no problem with that. However, I would argue that you're better off doing the opposite and doing lengthened partials, so staying near the bottom, after your set of full range of motion hip thrust to failure. And this is because of the aforementioned reasons, with longer length training being more productive for muscle growth. So now you know the 5 exercises that you should absolutely avoid. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Let me know if you like this concept, because I can definitely do it for like every single muscle group if you're interested. Don't forget to also leave a like to support my page, and hit subscribe if you want to see more videos just like this to level up your physique. And don't forget to hit the bell so you don't miss any of my videos, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.